Is Ai Weiwei China's most dangerous man? This is the title of an article in the Smithsonian Magazine issue of September 2012, written by Mark Stevens. He explains, arrested and harassed by the Chinese government, artist Ai Weiwei makes daring works unlike anything the world has ever seen. Why is Ai Weiwei so popular? According to Mark Stevens, the West's obsession with the rise of China as an economic superpower and one of the most powerful nations. China must have an artist with a comparable importance to stand up to China and hold up a mirror so China can see its failings. He states, now obsessed with China, the West would surely invent Ai Weiwei if he didn't already exist. Ai Weiwei is born August 28, 1957 in Beijing. His mother Gao Ying was a writer and his father Ai Qing was a famous poet. During the anti-rightist movement of 1958, his family was denounced by the Chinese government and sent to labor camp when Ai was just 1 year old. They lived in exile for 16 years. Upon Mao Zedong's death at the end of the Cultural Revolution, the family returned to Beijing in 1976. In 1978, he enrolled in the Beijing Film Academy and studied animation. From 1981 to 1993, for 12 years, he lived in the United States. During this period, he was exposed to the works of Marcel Duchamp, Andy Warhol, and Jasper Johns, which introduced him to the conceptual art and ready-made objects. In 1993, he returned to China after his father became ill. He is married to artist Lu Qing and has a son from an extramarital relationship. Art popularity in China is rising, and so is its censorship. So far, art was down on the list of things that were censored. TV, radio, and cinema have more mass appeal and are more scrutinized. Lately, with the rise and popularity of art, Chinese authorities are paying more attention to what artists are doing. For an exhibition to take place in China today, curators must get an approval from the government. An anonymous curator explains. President Xi is very authoritarian. Until recently, the art market was not that affected by this because it is very small with little influence. That is starting to change. The government is overseeing public museums more carefully today than they did in the past as a result of more popularity. Ai Weiwei has a problem with that. Authoritarians only have one thing in their minds: control. They are interested in seeing individuals as numbers rather than as human beings, so as to take away the power of the individual. All those systems, including surveillance and censorship, are about killing creativity and differences. The entire purpose is to make it easier to enact control. Ai Weiwei. He has become a symbol of rebellion and resistance worldwide for defying the Chinese government, despite being detained and under constant surveillance. His Beijing studio was demolished. The building was not up to code according to the government. He has been investigated, jailed, his passport taken so he cannot leave the country, but never silenced. Jet Pearl, in an article in the New Republic titled Noble and Ignoble in January of 2013, says, I admire Ai's courage. As the son of a well-known poet who suffered enormously during the Cultural Revolution, he is perfectly aware of the dangers of confronting a powerful regime that has little or no interest in human rights. Upon his return in China, Ai became fascinated with Chinese tradition and cultural heritage. He collects items from antique markets that he would present as artwork or ready-mades, a technique that he learned from Marcel Duchamp. In 1995, Ai smashed an antique urn, 2,000-year-old urns from the Han Dynasty. This is still one of his most provocative works, which criticizes the destruction of Chinese cultural values and social history during the Cultural Revolution. Some were outraged, calling it an act of vandalism. I countered by saying, Chairman Mao used to tell us that we can only build a new world if we destroy the old one. By dropping the urn, I questions the institutions that tell us what is valuable. Another famous work of Ai Weiwei is Template, which reflects the rapid change that China is going through and the destruction of the old to make room for the new. It is composed of wooden doors and windows salvaged from Ming and Qing dynasty houses which have been demolished to make way for new development. While on display in Germany in 2007, the structure collapsed after being exposed to the weather. Ai Weiwei embraced this change. When I saw how the site had collapsed, turn into some other shape, I was quite impressed, he told Bloomberg. It comes from ruins, and now it is really a ruin. Straight is Ai Weiwei's response to the Sichuan earthquake of 2008. Poorly built schools in the Sichuan province were devastated, leaving 5,000 students dead. He launched an investigation to collect the names of all the victims while uncovering the government's corruption in trying to hide the actual facts. This work is composed of 150 tons of steel rebar, which he collected from the site of the collapsed schools after the earthquake. Ai Weiwei had all of the retrieved metal parts straightened as if new and had arranged them in stacks in a way symbolically expressing his need to make things right. Straight is a statement about governmental corruption. In his latest work centers around the refugee crisis, which he takes very personally, since he was a refugee himself. I was a child refugee, writes Weiwei. I know how it feels to live in a camp, robbed of my humanity. Refugees must be seen to be an essential part of our shared humanity. From my youth, I experienced inhumane treatment from society. At the camp, we had to live in an underground dugout and were subjected to inexplicable hatred, discrimination, unprovoked insults, and assaults, all of which aimed to crush the basic human spirit rooted in my father's beliefs. As a result, I remember experiencing what felt like endless injustice. In such circumstances, there is no place to hide and there is no ways to escape. You feel like your life is up against a wall, or that life itself is a dimming light on the verge of being completely extinguished. Coping with the humiliation and suffering became the only way to survive. He wrapped up the Berlin concert house with 14,000 live vests used by refugees, and in Australia, he installed a 200 feet life raft filled with 300 faceless figures. He stated, "The refugee crisis is not about refugees. Rather, it's about us." Ai Weiwei has drawn criticism for exploiting his fame to promote his art, and he has been criticized for being a terrible artist. Some critics even say that he is an activist, not an artist. Jet Pearl of the New Republic describes him as a wonderful dissident but a terrible artist. Whether a political activist or an artist, a rebel or a revolutionary, Ai Weiwei's work is definitely controversial because it reveals the darkest part of human nature, questions our priorities and values. In his own words, our prioritization of financial gain over people's struggle for the necessities of life is the primary cause of much of the crisis. The West has all but abandoned its belief in humanity and support for the precious ideals contained in declarations on universal human rights. It has sacrificed these ideals for short-sighted cowardice and greed.